One question, one silence, one choice that shattered everything. But some broken things rebuild stronger. He had always been the reliable guy, the one who showed up on time, paid the bills, remembered anniversaries. 8 years of marriage had settled into a comfortable rhythm. Work, home, dinner, sleep, repeat. His wife was a good person, kind and caring. They had built a decent life together in their small house with the white fence and the garden that always needed weeding. Then she walked into his office on a Tuesday morning. The new consultant hired for the big hotel renovation project. She carried a leather portfolio under one arm and had this energy about her that made the whole room feel different. Creative, spontaneous, full of ideas that spilled out faster than most people could process them. From day one, working with her felt easy. Too easy. Maybe. They understood each other's vision for the project without needing many words. When he sketched an idea, she got it immediately. When she suggested changes, they always made sense. The hotel project became something special because of their partnership. Coffee breaks turned into lunch meetings. Lunch meetings stretched into evening discussions about design concepts and materials. It was all professional, he told himself. Just two professionals who worked well together. His wife noticed he was putting more effort into his appearance lately. New shirts, better cologne, that extra minute in front of the mirror. But she didn't say anything. Just watched him with quiet eyes. The project demanded long hours. The client wanted everything perfect. And they were determined to deliver. Late nights at the office became normal. Sometimes they'd order food and work through dinner, laughing at inside jokes about difficult clients and impossible deadlines. She made work fun again, in a way it hadn't been for years. His marriage had become background noise, comfortable but quiet. When was the last time he and his wife had really talked about something other than bills or grocery lists? When had they last stayed up late just talking? He couldn't remember. The distance had grown so gradually that he hadn't noticed until suddenly there was this other person who made him feel seen and heard and interesting. One Friday evening, they stood alone in the empty shell of the hotel's rooftop space. The construction crew had left hours ago. City lights twinkled through the large windows they'd insisted on installing. The space was taking shape exactly as they'd imagined it. She stood next to him, close enough that he could smell her perfume, looking out at the view. The silence between them felt heavy with something unspoken. Months of working together. Of growing closer. Of pretending there wasn't something building between them. She turned to face him, and in the dim light filtering up from the street below, her expression was serious. "Ever thought about crossing that line?" she whispered. His heart hammered in his chest. Every rational part of his brain screamed at him to step back, to laugh it off, to redirect the conversation to work. But he stood frozen, unable to move, unable to speak. The question hung in the air between them, like smoke. He didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Because the truth was complicated and messy and would change everything. Yes. He'd thought about it. Late at night when he couldn't sleep, during boring meetings when his mind wandered, every time she smiled at him or their hands accidentally touched while reviewing blueprints. But thinking about something and doing it were different things. Weren't they? There was still a line between fantasy and reality. Between what if and what is. That line felt very thin right now, almost invisible in the darkness of the unfinished rooftop space. She didn't push for an answer, just looked at him with understanding in her eyes, like she already knew what he was thinking, like she'd been thinking the same things. The moment stretched out, full of possibility and danger, and the weight of choices not yet made. Finally, he took a breath and suggested they call it a night. The drive home felt longer than usual. His wife was already asleep when he got there, or pretending to be. He lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, knowing that something had shifted. A door had opened, and he wasn't sure if he had the strength to close it. The weekend passed in a blur of normal activities that felt anything but normal. Grocery shopping, yard work, a dinner with friends, where he smiled and nodded, and felt like he was watching his life from outside his body. His phone buzzed with work messages, and each time he hoped it was her. When it wasn't, He felt disappointed. When it was, he felt guilty. Monday morning came, and he had to face her again. Had to figure out how to be professional after that moment on the rooftop. Had to decide what kind of person he was going to be. The choice felt impossibly heavy, and he still didn't have an answer. He told himself it was just one time. One moment of weakness on that rooftop when their hands touched and neither pulled away. Just one kiss that lasted longer than it should have. It didn't mean anything had to change. He could go back to normal, keep everything separate, maintain control. But that's not how these things work. Once you step over a line, it gets harder to see where it was in the first place. The next week, they had to visit suppliers in the next city, a legitimate business trip, everything approved by their bosses, separate hotel rooms booked, professional boundaries in place. Except those boundaries dissolved the moment they finished their last meeting and found themselves in the hotel bar, ordering drinks neither of them really wanted. He became someone he didn't recognize. A person who checked his phone constantly, deleting messages. Who created fake meeting names in his calendar. Who started leaving his wedding ring in the car console when he knew he'd see her. The lies came easier than they should have. His mind built entire fictional days that sounded believable when his wife asked how work went. At home, everything felt distant. His wife moved through their house like a ghost. And he was no better. They talked about surface things. Who would pick up milk? When the cable bill was due, whether they needed to call someone about the leaking faucet. Real conversations, the ones that mattered, had stopped happening months ago. Maybe years ago, if he was honest. She didn't ask direct questions, but he saw it in her eyes. The way she looked at him when she thought he wasn't watching. Sad, confused, maybe already knowing but not ready to face it. He wanted to feel worse about it, but mostly he just felt numb at home and alive everywhere else. The project became his excuse for everything. Late nights, weekend work, business trips. His boss loved his dedication. His wife grew quieter with each passing week. And the other woman, she made him laugh. Made him feel young and interesting. With her, he wasn't just a tired husband going through motions. He was someone worth paying attention to. 3 months went by like this. 3 months of living 2 lives, of being 2 different people. The guilt sat in his stomach like a rock, but not heavy enough to make him stop. Because stopping meant facing what he'd done. Stopping meant deciding who he really was. Then, one Tuesday afternoon, his wife was putting his jacket away and found something in the pocket, a receipt from a bookstore, not suspicious on its own, except this particular book was expensive and wrapped in gift paper. There was a card tucked inside the wrapping that she opened with shaking hands. The message was simple but damning. Words about seeing the world the same way, about understanding each other's vision. It wasn't signed, but it didn't need to be. His wife stood in their bedroom holding evidence of his secret life, and something inside her broke. She didn't call him right away. Didn't text demanding explanations. Instead, she sat on their bed for a long time, just thinking, processing, remembering all the small signs she'd ignored or explained away. The new cologne, the extra care with his appearance, the phone always face down, the distance that had grown between them like a wall. That night when he came home, she was waiting. Not angry or crying, just very, very still. She asked him about his day in a normal voice, and he gave his normal lies. She nodded along like she believed him. Made dinner like nothing was wrong. They ate in silence. He went to take a shower, and when he came back, she was sitting on the couch holding the wrapped book and card. Her hands weren't shaking anymore. She just looked tired in a way that had nothing to do with sleep. "How long?" she asked quietly. Those 2 words destroyed the careful world he'd built. All his prepared explanations, his ready excuses, his planned deflections, they all crumbled. He stood there, dripping water on the carpet, wearing his comfortable home clothes, looking at the stranger his wife had become. Or maybe he was the stranger. He couldn't tell anymore. The truth came out in pieces. Not all at once, because he couldn't handle that. First he tried denying, but the evidence was right there, in her hands. Then he tried minimizing, saying it wasn't serious, didn't mean anything, but her eyes told him she wasn't buying it. Finally, as midnight approached, he told her enough truth that the shape of his betrayal became clear. Not every detail, but enough. She listened without interrupting, her face blank, and that scared him more than tears would have. When he finished talking, his wife did something he didn't expect. She asked him to leave for the night. Not forever. Not with his things packed, just to go somewhere else so she could think clearly without him in her space. Her voice was calm but firm, and he didn't argue. He grabbed his keys and wallet and left the house they'd bought together. He drove around for an hour, then checked into a hotel across town. Not the fancy place where he'd met the other woman. Somewhere cheap and anonymous where he could sit in the dark and think about what he'd done. The room smelled like old carpet and cleaning products. He sat on the bed and called her, the other woman, needing to talk to someone who would understand, but her reaction surprised him. She went quiet when he explained what happened. The silence stretched uncomfortably before she finally spoke. "I never wanted to wreck your marriage," she said softly. "Maybe I was just the easy escape from whatever you were running from." Her words hit him hard. Was that true? Had he been running away from his problems instead of facing them? The connection he felt with her, was it real or just exciting because it was new and forbidden? Sitting alone in that hotel room, he wasn't sure anymore. His wife spent those same hours differently. She didn't cry or break things or call her friends. Instead, she thought deeply about what she wanted, not what was fair or what people would expect, but what would actually make her life better going forward. By morning, she had clarity. She called him and told him to come home. When he walked through the door, she was sitting at their kitchen table with coffee and a notebook. She'd written things down, organized her thoughts. She looked at him with eyes that were tired but determined. Her terms were simple and non-negotiable. He could either end everything with the other woman completely and commit to fixing their marriage through real work and counseling, or he could leave for good. No halfway options, no trial separations. No, let's see how it goes. Choose now, choose clearly, and live with that choice. He chose to stay. Part of him wondered if he was being a coward, taking the safer path, but another part realized he'd been a coward all along, and maybe staying was actually the harder choice. He called the other woman and met her at a coffee shop to end things properly. That conversation was painful. She called him out for not being brave enough to choose her, said he was settling for comfortable instead of fighting for something real. He couldn't completely disagree, but he also knew that what felt like passion might just have been the thrill of something forbidden. With her, everything was easy, because nothing was tested by real life. She left the hotel project. He requested a different team. Seeing each other would make everything impossible. The client wasn't happy about the change, but they made it work. Counseling started the following week. Sitting in that therapist's office felt humbling and necessary. His wife didn't hold back during sessions. She talked about feeling invisible for years, about how he'd stopped really seeing her long before anyone else appeared, about dreams she'd put aside to support his career, about the life she'd settled for instead of the one she'd wanted. Hearing her pain described out loud forced him to face truths about himself. He'd been a lazy husband, taking her for granted, assuming she'd always be there while he put minimal effort into their relationship. The problem hadn't started with the other woman. That was just a symptom of a marriage he'd stopped tending years ago. But his wife had her own regrets too. She admitted she'd also settled into routine, stopped pursuing things that made her happy, let herself disappear into being just a wife instead of a full person. They'd both been sleepwalking through their lives together. The months that followed were hard. Some days felt like they were making progress. They'd have an actual conversation, laugh at something together, remember why they'd fallen in love initially. Other days felt like moving backward. She'd get triggered by something small like him being late from work, and all the hurt would rush back. He had to accept being the one who'd broken things. Accept her anger. Accept that trust, once shattered, doesn't just glue back together. Some days, he resented being treated like the villain, wanted credit for staying and trying. But then he'd remember what he'd done, and the resentment would turn to shame. The hotel project finished without him involved in the final stages. The grand opening was a big success. He saw photos online of the rooftop space completed exactly as originally planned. It looked beautiful in the pictures, but he felt nothing except relief that chapter was closed. Time moved differently now. Days felt longer, but somehow a year passed. Then another. The marriage they rebuilt didn't look like the old one. Couldn't look like it. Too much had happened. They were different people now, carrying knowledge that couldn't be unknown. They made practical changes first. Sold the house with too many bad memories and moved to a smaller place downtown. Closer to the art studio, his wife had always dreamed of opening. That dream had stayed buried for years while she supported his career. Now it was her turn, and he supported it fully. Partly from guilt, but also from genuine desire to see her happy. He changed jobs entirely. Different firm, different projects, different people. The new place paid less but demanded fewer hours. He came home for dinner most nights now. Revolutionary concept, apparently. Being present in his own life instead of just passing through it. His wife threw herself into her art. The studio became her sanctuary. She taught classes, displayed local artists' work, created pieces that came from somewhere deep and real. Watching her come alive again was both beautiful and painful. It showed him how much of herself she'd suppressed during their marriage, how much he'd missed by not paying attention. They were careful with each other now, super aware of small things that might hurt or trigger memories. Date nights happened every week, scheduled like important meetings because apparently their relationship required that level of intentionality. It felt forced at first, artificial. But slowly, it became something they both looked forward to. Trust was the hardest part. She'd check his phone sometimes, trying to be casual about it but not quite pulling it off. He let her look anytime she wanted. No passwords, no hidden apps, nothing locked. At first he felt resentful about being monitored. Then he realized this was the price of betrayal. She was living with doubt he'd created. Late-night conversations happened more often now. Real ones about feelings and fears and hopes. Things they'd stopped talking about years ago. Sometimes these talks went well and brought them closer. Sometimes they opened old wounds and ended in tears or silence, but at least they were talking. He ran into the other woman once, completely by accident. At a design conference he'd forgotten she might attend. They made awkward small talk for exactly 3 minutes, both eager to escape. He felt nothing seeing her except relief that he felt nothing. That person he'd been with her felt like a stranger from someone else's life. His wife asked him questions sometimes that had no good answers. Do you think about her? Yes. Sometimes. But not how you think. Do you regret staying? Complex question with complex answers. Was she better than me? Impossible to answer without causing pain. He learned which questions to answer honestly, and which ones needed gentler handling. They started traveling together. Small trips at first. Weekend getaways to places they'd never been. Neutral territories with no memories attached. These trips were good. Away from normal life, they could be different versions of themselves. Try on new patterns without old triggers everywhere. But home was where the real work happened. Learning to fight fairly. Learning to speak up before resentment built. Learning that love wasn't just a feeling but a choice made daily. Some days that choice felt natural. Other days, it felt like heavy lifting. Both were okay. Both were part of the reality of starting over with someone you'd hurt deeply. His wife built friendships he'd never bothered to help maintain before. Her own support system that didn't revolve around their marriage. This was healthy, the therapist said. Having separate lives that came together instead of merged identities, losing themselves in each other. He built his own friendships too. Guys from the gym, neighbors, people from his new job, creating a fuller life instead of expecting one person to meet every need. 2 years after everything fell apart, they went back to counseling for a check-in. The therapist asked them both what had changed. His wife said she'd learned to choose herself sometimes, to have boundaries, To recognize her own worth wasn't tied to being a perfect wife. He said he'd learned that comfort and happiness weren't the same thing. That real love required effort and attention, and constant choosing. The therapist asked if they'd recommend staying together after betrayal to others in similar situations. They looked at each other for a long moment. His wife answered first. "Not for everyone," she said carefully. "Only if both people actually want to do the work and understand why things broke in the first place." He nodded agreement. "And only if you can accept that it changes everything. You can't go back to before. You can only build something new and decide if that's enough." 3 years had passed since that night his wife found the receipt. 3 years of therapy and tears and trying. Their marriage now was like a bone that had broken and healed. Stronger at the breakpoint maybe, but forever marked by the injury. You could see where it happened if you looked closely enough. They'd found a rhythm that worked for them. Not perfect, but real. Morning coffee together before work, actual conversations about their days, touching each other when passing in the hallway, small gestures that said, "I see you, I choose you." Things that seemed simple but had been missing for years. His wife's art studio was thriving now. She had regular students and occasional gallery showings. He'd go to her exhibitions and watch her talk about her work with passion he'd forgotten she possessed. Sometimes he felt sad about the years she'd hidden that light. But mostly he felt grateful she'd found it again. He'd become someone different at work too. Not just showing up and going through motions. Actually caring about what he created. Setting boundaries about overtime, saying no to projects that would consume his life. His career had plateaued because of these choices, but he slept better at night. They'd learned each other's triggers and how to handle them. When she got quiet and distant, he knew it meant old hurt was surfacing. He'd learned not to get defensive but to sit with her in that pain and acknowledge what he'd caused. When he felt suffocated by her need for reassurance, she'd learned to step back and trust the progress they'd made. Some things were genuinely better now than before everything happened. They didn't take each other for granted anymore. Didn't assume the other would always be there without effort. Every day was a conscious choice to stay and build something worth keeping. That awareness, painful as it was, kept them honest. Other things were lost forever. A certain innocence about their relationship. The easy trust that comes before betrayal. The luxury of not thinking too hard about commitment. Those things died and couldn't be resurrected. They'd learned to grieve those losses and accept what remained. His wife did something interesting with her art. Started a series about transformation and healing. Pieces that showed broken things becoming something new. Not repaired to their original state, but reformed into different beauty. People connected with these pieces deeply. Turned out lots of people understood the concept of being broken and choosing to become something else. He sometimes saw the other woman's work featured in design magazines, stunning projects in cities far away. He felt only professional admiration now, like seeing work from any talented person he used to know. That fever dream of who he'd been with her belonged to someone else. A version of himself he'd outgrown. One evening after dinner, his wife brought up something that had clearly been on her mind. They were cleaning up together. A domestic dance they'd perfected. She dried while he washed, working in comfortable silence until she spoke. "I've been thinking," she started, carefully placing a glass in the cabinet, "about the woman I was before all this happened. Sometimes I miss her. She trusted people easily. Didn't question things. Believed in happy endings without fine print." He stopped washing and turned to face her, waiting. "But that woman was also kind of asleep," she continued. "Going through life on autopilot. Not asking for what she needed. Not even knowing what she needed. In a strange way, even though I hate how we got here, I don't hate who I've become." He dried his hands slowly, thinking about how to respond. "Do you regret staying?" he asked. She'd asked him this question dozens of times over the years, but this was the first time he'd turned it around. She smiled sadly. "Some days, yes. When I remember how much easier life would be without all this history. But most days, no. We're building something real now, instead of pretending something fake was enough. I just wish we'd been brave enough to face our problems before someone else got hurt." They stood in their kitchen. This couple who'd almost destroyed each other, and somehow chose to do the hard work of starting over. The silence between them felt full, but not heavy. "I think about that night a lot," he admitted. When she asked if I'd thought about crossing the line, "I wish I'd walked away right then. Wish I'd come home and talked to you about why I was tempted. Maybe we could have fixed things without burning everything down first." His wife nodded. "Maybe, or maybe we needed to hit bottom to wake up. People don't usually change comfortable situations, even when comfortable isn't the same as happy." She had a point. They'd been coasting for years, both of them, letting their marriage decay slowly. His betrayal had been the crisis that forced them to actually deal with their problems. Didn't excuse what he did, but gave it context. They finished cleaning and moved to the living room. She picked up a book while he scrolled through his phone. Just existing together in shared space, which had taken years to feel comfortable again. "You know what's weird?" she said suddenly, looking up from her book. "I'm grateful sometimes, not for what you did, but for where it led us. We're actually partners now instead of roommates pretending to be married." He considered this. "I'll never stop regretting that I hurt you. Never. But I also can't regret the person we've both become because of working through it." That was the truth they'd learned to live with. Multiple truths existing simultaneously. He'd betrayed her trust horribly, and they'd built something stronger from the ruins. Some choices destroy everything, and some destruction leads to better foundations. Both things were real. Later that night, lying in bed in the dark, she asked one more question. "If you could go back, knowing everything that would happen, would you still make that choice?" He'd learned to be honest, even when honesty hurt. "No," he said firmly. "I'd choose the hard conversation with you instead. I'd tell you I was unhappy and scared and didn't know how to fix us. I'd risk being vulnerable instead of running to something easier." She was quiet for so long he thought she'd fallen asleep. Then her voice came soft in the darkness. "I wish you had too. But maybe neither of us was ready for that conversation back then." They fell asleep holding hands, two people who'd crossed terrible lines and spent years finding their way back to each other. Not the same people who'd started this journey, but maybe better versions, more honest, more aware, more grateful for the choice they made every day to keep trying. Their story wasn't a fairy tale with a perfect ending. It was messier and sadder and more real than that. But it was theirs, built from broken pieces and hard choices, and the decision to not give up when giving up would have been easier. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes, we're still trying, is its own kind of success.